Let me know when we are live, so I'll start.
So Alliance is part of APNA, right?
Gigi, Alliance it's Apna Alliance, and we are our members are the spouses of Apna. Ali, let me know when we go live, okay? Because I'll start.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Okay, we are good.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you again for joining us for this webinar. Today's webinar is very special as we have a very special guest with us. She's somebody that I have known for many years and someone that not only I, but many other women and of course men respect. Today we have Dr. Maliha Lodhi joining us, who will speak with us about perspectives on women's empowerment, a personal journey. I, for one, cannot wait to get further inspired and motivated by her. And I know you all will be inspired and motivated. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Malia Lodhi. Dr. Malia Lodhi was recently Pakistan's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in New York, the first woman to represent Pakistan at the UN. She twice served as the Pakistan's ambassador to the US, 1993, 1996, 1999 to 2002, and as High Commissioner to Britain, 2002 to 2008. She also served as member of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on from 2001 to 2005. She was the first woman in all of Asia to become the editor of a national daily newspaper in 1994. In 1994, Time magazine nominated her as one of 100 people in the world who will also help shape the 21st century, the only one from Pakistan. She was a public policy scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Center for International Scholars in Washington in 2010 and fellow at Harvard University's Kennedy School in 2008. She is the recipient of the President's Award of Halal-e-Imtiaz for public service in Pakistan. She is the author of 2 books, Pakistan's Encounter with Democracy and The External Challenge. She also edited a volume titled Pakistan, Beyond the Crisis State, published in 2011. Columbia University Press and Oxford University Press. Dr. Malia Lodhi, I speak for everyone here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today to share your personal story. Over to you. You have to unmute.
One always forgets to do this. You know,
Right.
At times of COVID, you're beginning to sort of learn the kind of skills that you thought you'd never need. So there we are. But Nazia, thank you so much for inviting me to speak to Alliance members. I mean, you have always had a very special place in my heart because Alliance and APNA, have played such a vital role in so much that has to be done vis-a-vis our community in terms of connecting our people, in terms of connecting them to their land of origin or land of birth, and also the very many projects that APNA as well as Alliance engages in. I can only say I have great admiration for the work that you do, and I hope you'll continue to do that. I think, our overseas Pakistani community is a, real asset and a source of great pride for us. So it's always a pleasure. So let me start where you kind of, said something about me in the introduction. When I arrived at the United Nations, of course, I was the first woman from Pakistan to represent the country at the UN. So I was presenting my credentials to the then Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon. And, he was a person who rarely smiled, or at least he looked as if he was never smiling. So I said to him, Mr. Secretary General, it's a great honor for me to present my credentials. It took 70 years for my country to send a woman. And it just goes to show that we take a long time, but we get there in the end. And I could see the smile on his face because he thought it was rather amusing. And he said, well, I'm so glad that, and I said, I hope I'm not going to, it's not going to take another 70 years for Pakistan to nominate another woman. So, as all of you know, members of the Alliance, we live in an age of unparalleled challenge, but also of unprecedented opportunity. And in this globalized, networked era, I think women have an extraordinary opportunity to harness the intellectual as well as the technological tools of our age to ensure our voices are heard more effectively. I also believe that women are uniquely positioned and gifted to become bridge builders in a world that remains afflicted by conflict. Only in the last few days, we have seen the kind of violence and bloodshed, which was heartbreaking for all of us, in occupied Palestine. So, this is a world where there are so many challenges and so many conflicts that are going on, so much aggression that is taking place against innocent people, as we saw in Palestine. So women have a particular role, I think, as mothers, as leaders, as politicians, as members of the community, to play this role of being peacemakers and bridge builders. Now, turning to my own professional journey and experience, I've had several careers, teaching, journalism, and diplomacy. But I think the common thread or the scarlet thread that was running through all these diverse fields is communication. So whether it was communicating with students, as somebody who was teaching or lecturing, or through writing with readers, or in articulating the country's interests and policies in the context of diplomacy, the key and what connected all of these diverse fields was really communication, learning how to, speak, but also importantly, how to listen. And a major part of my professional evolution has really come from responding to the spirit of our times, to, in other words, responding to the way the world has been changing, and it's been changing at a very, very rapid pace. In fact, it's a constant sort of almost daily endeavor to stay in sync with the rapid transformations that are taking place all around us in order to be able to harness these changes for self-growth, for self-improvement, and to learn new skills, especially technical skills, which are so important today. And I think our kids and our grandkids, they kind of, they grow up with all of this, but many of us, we've had to really learn this because many of these technical advancement progress took place when we were much older. So, I have to confess, I have to admit that I confronted gender stereotypes in just about every setting that I worked in. I recall many times during my 2 assignments in Washington that Nazia just referred to, when I was Pakistan's envoy, as well as in London, walking into a senator or an MP's office with my male colleague from the embassy. And often it was my male colleague who was mistaken for the ambassador, and I for a secretary. I was supposed to be carrying something for him. And then my poor embarrassed colleague had to sort of correct the person who thought that he was the ambassador, saying, no, it's her, not me. And I think even, even at receptions at the White House or Buckingham Palace, when the master of ceremonies would often look anxiously at me to ask, so how long will your spouse, the ambassador, take to join us? Because I have to introduce you to either Her Highness or to His Excellency, the President of the United States. And I would have to then say, no, there's no spouse, that's me. Please introduce me. So I think the presumption and preconception about an ambassador's gender shows really, because these the Western environments that I was functioning in, or that I was working in. It just goes to show how pervasive these stereotypes are and how they cut across cultures and national frontiers. So when I first arrived in Washington as Pakistan's envoy, it was on a bitterly cold, this is the first assignment, it was on a bitterly cold afternoon. And it was snowing, there's a lot of ice around, slippery ice. And in a way, the chill in the weather served as a metaphor for the chill in the relationship between the two countries, which, as I'm sure all of you know, has lurched between deep estrangement, but also very close engagement. And this has been a roller coaster ride, and it's been a relationship that's often been in crisis. And then again, engagement, re-engagement, and then crisis. So, this has been a cyclical kind of a pattern. So when I arrived, my task was to work on the erosion and, possibly the elimination of multi-layered sanctions that had been imposed on Pakistan. And really the challenge was to ensure adoption by Congress of a piece of legislation which was called the Brown Amendment, named after Senator Brown. And under the nuclear sanctions that the US had imposed on our country, our military equipment and planes had been embargoed. So in other words, we had paid for all of this equipment, including the F-16s, but they were not handed over to us. They were not delivered to us because of the sanctions. So we needed new legislation to end this discriminatory treatment of Pakistan. We were also under economic sanctions. The prime minister at that time was the late Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto. And she managed to convince the then US President, Bill Clinton, about how unfair US policy was and that it had to change. And really that was the background to how this bipartisan initiative emerged. So we at the embassy had to lobby very hard to ensure that Congress actually adopts this piece of legislation. I had never done this before. So it was literally learning from scratch and learning as we went along. But in my second term, and I have to say, we were successful in having the Brown Amendment adopted, and it was an extraordinary moment, an extraordinary learning experience for me. But in my second term in Washington, the professional challenge was even greater, as I had to deal with the situation in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, a very traumatic moment in the life of America, and of course, a moment and an event that had shaken the world, actually. So, engaging in public diplomacy became my utmost and my urgent task. And this again meant reaching out to members of Congress, to the media, and as well as to think tanks, the intellectual community who shape opinion in a country. And this assignment involved intense public diplomacy, which I had to undertake in an arena where the possibilities are enormous. And I think they're particularly enormous for unorthodox and unconventional diplomacy. So I will, return to that in a minute. But what I do want to say is that I was, as I was dealing with these challenges, I found that there really is no primer to help you in this game of changing perceptions and influencing hearts and minds. And I really think much of it is learned on the job by understanding the environment and fashioning a strategy that is implementable. But what did help were my communication skills that I had learned as a journalist. And I think what was also enormously important, and I think it's important in every endeavor that we take, which is a team spirit. As team leader, you have to ensure that members of the team feel they have a sense of ownership over what you're doing. And they also feel that they are sort of, in a way, equal members of an enterprise, whatever it is that you're undertaking, whatever the aim is, and they have to actually buy into this aim. So as I went about this task, I faced a twin challenge, changing mindsets within my own virtually all-male embassy. In Washington, it was all male in my first term, and it was all male in my second term. Fortunately, when I got to London, I had 2 female members of of my mission. And of course, when I was at the UN, I had female members, but in Washington, it was very different. So, I had to deal both within and without. But as I said, a woman, obviously, a female boss has to sort of, in a way, keep proving herself and has to demonstrate that she is willing to listen, but then she also knows how to crack the whip. But I was fortunate that we were able to work as an effective team. But of course, it took a huge amount of effort. Now in Washington, the closest and most enduring relationships that I forged were interestingly with other women professionals, female professionals. And two of my closest friends were female US Assistant Secretaries of State. And after I'd served in DC for about 3 years, one of them said to me that in all this time, whenever anyone visited from Pakistan, they would invariably ask, "How is Maliha doing?" A question she said she never got about any of my male predecessors. But she hastened to add that, "Don't worry, my male colleagues are constantly evaluating me in the same way. So really, it's no different here." And this was not a surprising revelation for me, but it did reinforce the widespread notion that female professionals tend to be on probation pretty much all their life. I think a great deal of that is changing. But of course, I'm talking about the 90s, and I'm also talking about the 2000s. This is the period that I was there. We're now in, I can't believe we're already, I mean, this pandemic has made us lose a sense of time, but I can't believe that that is so many decades ago, actually. So, with my female colleagues in diplomacy, in America as well as in Britain, we often debated whether women brought something different to diplomacy. And although we agreed that female diplomats tended to be natural uh, communicators and natural problem solvers, and of course, natural multitaskers, women don't have a choice. We have to multitask. We also endorsed, the general view that in situations of tensions, women, as I said before, when I started, tend to build bridges rather than build or erect walls. And research, in fact, has shown that women do find common ground for peaceful resolution of disputes more easily than men, perhaps because in the family unit, women are often the ones who are trying to mend relationships, trying to ensure that the family is well knit and members are getting along with each other. But of course, to be a good diplomat, or for that matter, a good professional, irrespective of what you do, whether you're a doctor or you're engineer or you're a diplomat or you're a journalist, men and women need the same qualities. They need the same attributes or skills. But I think a female professional also needs something more. She needs a great deal of perseverance and patience to overcome and to combat the prejudices that still exist in every society, actually, and to also deal with very, very traditional mindsets. And again, I would say they exist in the East as well as in the West. But for me, a defining moment of my professional career really came, as I was saying before, also in the wake of 9/11, during my second stint as ambassador in the United States. Because it was at that time that the entire international focus turned on Pakistan. And this presented me with the most imposing diplomatic challenge of my career, which is undertaking public diplomacy at a very fast pace, so that I could keep up with the 24/7 news cycle. And it was a very fast changing, rapidly changing situation in which the stakes were also very high. I was all too aware. I was very conscious and very sensitive to the fact that one slip, one error could have implications. And this was not personal implications for my country. And I suddenly realized that I was expected not just to represent my own country, Pakistan, but also to speak for the Muslim world, to speak as a Muslim. So undertaking this daunting mission threw me into a world of, a lot of ill-informed presumptions, mischaracterizations, misperceptions, and as well as stereotypes and caricatures of Muslim women, of Pakistan, of Islam. So, it was a huge challenge because in a way, what I had to do was to challenge all of this through diplomacy by soundbite. because you don't get a lot of airtime. You're just thrown a question and you have to respond to it, and you have to respond in a soundbite, which is not easy to do when you're trying to explain, who you are, what your faith means to you, and why so much of the Western media gets it so wrong. Um, so it was a very testing experience of my career. But I think in hindsight, also a very fulfilling one, because this unprecedented spotlight on Pakistan also gave me a huge opportunity to explain and articulate our position, and to try to change the skewed thinking about our country. But I also feel that when I was serving abroad, is that irrespective of whatever your cultural background is, I was at the UN. The UN has, as you know, 193 countries represented there, which means in a way you're ambassador to the world. And I was very, very fortunate because there was a very large number of female ambassadors, and we had our own club, which was extraordinary because I think we all related to each other so easily. And a very special bond existed because we were very aware that we were still in a minority. Out of 193, while I was there, the number rose to around 40 or 42, which is a record in the history of the UN. But 40, 42 out of 193 is still a minority. So what it taught me was how easily women professionals relate to each other and how much they're able to do for each other, and how important it is for us to mentor the newcomers. As the new ones came in, we, in a way, the ones who had been there longer were able to take them under their wings and sort of show them the ropes. Because that's not something that you do with the boys, as it were. You can only do it with the girls. So, the UN experience was completely different for me. And I have to say that it also, again, reinforced in my mind the vital importance of soft power in projecting the country and in making sure that we are heard, our interests are understood. I undertook a number of soft power initiatives there to showcase our rich cultural heritage, presenting our art, music, and cuisine, to really make people understand who we are, and also to press our issues. I mean, you don't do this in a vacuum. Um, so, as I look back, the professional journey, it's hard for me to, in a way, it's hard for me to summarize, what are the lessons that we can draw? Because as I said, one doesn't start off with a little manual which sort of says, okay, 1, 2, 3, here's what you have to do, and here's how you, deal with the challenges. But I do think that what is important is not to ever, not to be complaining all the time, not to look at the obstacles and think that, oh God, I can't overcome these. And this is so unfair. Life is unfair. And the environment often does present, hurdles and handicaps which men don't confront in the same way. Of course, they confront their set of obstacles in their careers, but women, have to confront many more. So I think the main issue is that don't ever be daunted by them. Don't let these overwhelm you. You take them in your stride. You can't pretend that they don't exist. But I think the key is to sort of say, okay, so they're there, but I'm not going to let them distract me. I'm going to continue to do what I have to do because I have to achieve an objective. And I think, I know there are men listening in too. This is not just for the girls, but I think women tend to be more goal oriented because maybe there are fewer of us still in every profession, practically every profession. Maybe in some professions, there are greater numbers. So, so in that sense, being goal oriented, being very clear about what the aim is, that also is helpful, because then at least and you can have a single determined sort of focus on that particular objective or aim. And, as I look, at Pakistan itself, and obviously people like me come from a privileged background. And we look around us and we see that there are those who are less fortunate than us. And, clearly we want them to also have the same opportunities that we have. And for that, obviously, the only way that can happen is through education. That is the enabler. That is the only instrument that can empower both men and women. Because without that, you are completely, you have no opportunity. So, I would, always make a big pitch for the need for girls and boys both to be in school. Pakistan still, sadly, is amongst the group of countries where very large numbers, I don't want to quote the exact number because it gets very gloomy, but millions of children, girls and boys, more girls than boys, but still are school going age, but out of school because they simply don't have the schools where, their parents can send them. They can't afford them or they're not available. So I think, for women, for girls, the road to empowerment lies through education. And I think the only way we can help those less fortunate is to contribute to causes like the Citizens Foundation, who do such an enormous job. There's DIL, which is out of, as you know, out of LA, meaning that's where the founder is based. But it's a huge organization. So there are many ways in which we can help in this area. But when you look at the overall picture of empowerment of women, I think women in Pakistan have come a long way. I think you see, many outstanding examples of women doing very well in different fields, whether they're as lawyers or as doctors or as political leaders. I mean, we still remain the Muslim country which had the first elected prime minister who happened to be a woman. So, so we have achieved those milestones. But as I said, in a way, none of us can really be content until we see those, underprivileged women having access to both education and health. I mean, we live in an era of the pandemic, and we see what's happening in our neighboring country. But Pakistan has managed this crisis so far, touch wood. But again, it's the less fortunate who will not have access to vaccinations the same way, either because they have a mental block or because they have to travel long distances to get vaccinated. So let me sort of in a way conclude with just this pitch that I know that women face difficulties in their professional journeys, but women have an extraordinary resilient capacity to deal with these challenges. And I myself have, seen others around me who have inspired me, who motivated me to also, in a way, confront these. And I think we'll never be able to get away from stereotypes. I mean, there'll always be some stereotype out there, whether in the West or in our own country, that we have to deal with. So, so be it. Nazia, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I don't have words. You continue inspiring us, and this, I know all our members, we will try our best to follow in your footsteps. This, it's sincere appreciation from our EC, from our members. And Maliappa, I wish we could have you in person in Apna, in Alliance. And, and inshallah, maybe in the coming years, we'll have you over and we'll have like, sitting with the members. And so thank you very much for giving us your time and joining us. And like I said, we will do our best to follow in your footsteps, and you keep inspiring us and you keep doing the work that you do. And we need more women like you in Pakistan and all over the world, more Muslim women like you.
Thank you so much, Nazia. Thanks very much. Thank you to all the members who joined today.
Okay, thank you very much. Khuda Hafiz.